homeless man was found kneeling in the snow, his hands covered in blood. The woman everyone loved was barely breathing behind her bakery. Police moved fast because the answer seemed obvious, but one K9 refused to look at the man in cuffs. Bishop turned toward the crowd and growled at someone else. That one warning forced Officer Holt to ask a question no one wanted to face. Would you have looked twice? Comment where you're watching from, and please like, share, and subscribe. Snow came down gently over Maple Glen, Vermont, the kind of snow that made a town look kinder than it really was. It softened the roofs of the brick storefronts, dusted the black iron lamps along Main Street, and turned every passing headlight into a pale golden blur. By 6 in the evening, the winter market had filled the center of town with music, steam, and the smell of sugar. Children moved between wooden booths with paper lanterns swinging from mittened hands. Parents held cups of cocoa close to their chests. An old man near the courthouse sold beeswax candles from a red wagon. Someone had set up a waffle iron under a striped canopy, and the sweet smell drifted down the street each time the wind shifted. For most people, it was the safest night of the year, the night Maple Glen pretended that snow, darkness, and loneliness could all be kept outside the glow of the market lights. Officer Warren Holt did not believe in pretending. At 40, Warren still had the tall, athletic build of a man who kept himself ready because the job did not care whether he was tired. His dark navy uniform sat clean and tight beneath a black tactical vest, badge dull under the falling snow, radio mic clipped near his left shoulder, duty belt resting with familiar weight at his hips. He moved slowly through the crowd, not because he was relaxed, but because moving too fast made people nervous. His sharp blue-gray eyes passed over exits, doorways, the hands tucked too deep in coat pockets, the gap between the candle booth and the alley beside the pharmacy, the delivery lane behind Wells Bakery. He had learned over the years that trouble rarely announced itself where everyone was looking. It preferred edges. Beside him walked Bishop, a 5-year-old German Shepherd K9, with a black and tan coat and a dark saddle across his back. The dog's harness carried a clear K9 patch on both sides, and a small winter light blinked softly near his shoulder strap. Bishop did not pull. He did not sniff at food carts or children's mittens or dropped crumbs near the waffle stand. He moved with the composed focus of a partner who understood that crowds were not scenery. Crowds were motion, pressure, noise, and hidden decisions. Warren trusted the dog's discipline more than he trusted most people's words. "Quiet tonight," Deputy Cole Ransom said, falling into step from the curb. Cole was 31, clean-cut blonde hair showing under the edge of his black beanie, his badge newer and brighter than Warren's. Even in the cold, there was an eager tension in him, a need to be useful before anyone questioned whether he was. "Quiet is a word people use right before paperwork," Warren said. Cole gave a short laugh, then glanced toward the bakery. "Audrey's line is still halfway down the block. She made those maple rolls again." Warren looked over. Wells Bakery glowed warm behind frosted windows. Audrey Wells stood inside near the front counter, honey-brown hair tied low, sleeves dusted with flour, smiling as she handed a bag to a child who could barely see over the display case. She had the kind of presence that made people lower their voices when they stepped into her shop, not out of fear, but out of respect for warmth. Warren had seen her leave bags of bread beside the church steps when she thought no one was watching. He had also seen her refuse to let drunk men sleep behind her ovens when it became unsafe. Kindness in Audrey had boundaries. That was one reason people trusted her. Bishop's ears shifted. Warren felt it before he saw anything. The dog's head angled toward the narrow passage between the bakery and the old tailor shop. A dark seam cut through the light of Main Street. Warren slowed. "What is it?" Cole asked. Bishop did not bark. He simply stopped, weight shifting forward. Warren touched 2 fingers to the leash, not a correction, just contact. The alley was too far away for him to hear anything over the market music. A boy laughed near the cocoa booth. A bell rang at the candle wagon. Somewhere, a woman called for her daughter to stay close. Then the scream came. It tore through the music so sharply that several people dropped what they were holding. Warren was already moving. "Cole, with me." Bishop surged beside him, controlled but fast, claws scraping over packed snow. They cut past the bakery line, Warren raising one hand to part the crowd without shoving anyone. The scream had come from behind the shops, from the service alley where trash bins, delivery doors, and stacked crates disappeared into a blue-black shadow beyond the reach of the festival lights. The smell hit first: cold metal, garbage, spilled sugar, and blood. Warren rounded the corner with his hand near his holster, but not on it. Bishop entered low and alert, body between Warren and the blind side of the alley. Cole came in a step behind, breath hard in the freezing air. Audrey Wells lay on her side in the snow near the bakery's rear door, one arm bent beneath her, burgundy coat darkening at the shoulder. Blood had spread beneath her in a shape the snow tried and failed to hide. Kneeling over her was Calvin Dorsey, the homeless man who slept some nights under the bus station awning and some nights nowhere anyone could name. He was 64, thin under a worn brown-gray winter coat, gray hair tangled at his collar, a frayed scarf hanging loose around his neck. His hands were red to the wrists, his knees were planted in dirty snow. "Don't lift her," Calvin said, voice shaking but strangely precise. "Keep her airway clear. She's breathing but shallow. Pressure here, not there, here. Call EMT now. Don't let her sleep." Cole saw the blood before he heard the words. "Hands where I can see them." Calvin looked up, and Warren saw terror in his pale eyes, but not the kind he expected from a cornered attacker. This was the terror of someone watching a life slip through his fingers. "I'm holding pressure," Calvin said. "She's bleeding through. I need another cloth." "Move away from her," Cole snapped. "No," Calvin said, and the single word cracked under the weight of panic. "If I move, she bleeds more." Warren stepped in close enough to see Calvin's hands. The pressure was direct, firm, placed high near the shoulder wound. The old man's palms were pressed flat, not curled as if around a weapon. His breath came in broken bursts. Audrey's face was pale, lashes trembling against her cheeks. "Audrey," Warren said, lowering his voice, "can you hear me?" Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Bishop stood rigid near Warren's right leg, not fixed on Calvin, but scanning the alley mouth, the stacked crates, the shadowed line where the service lane opened toward the back lot. That should have mattered immediately. In later hours, Warren would hate himself a little for not letting it matter sooner. Footsteps slapped behind them. A woman from the candle booth reached the alley entrance, scarf half unwrapped, eyes huge. Oh God, Audrey." Her gaze landed on Calvin, on the blood, on his coat, his beard, the place he occupied in town before anyone asked why. "He did it," she cried. "He did this to her." "Mom, step back," Warren said. "I saw him over her," she said, voice rising. "I came around after I heard the scream, and he was right there. He was on top of her." "Did you see him strike her?" Warren asked. The woman faltered, but fear had already become certainty in her face. "He was there. Look at him." Cole moved then, quick and decisive, pulling Calvin's right arm back. Calvin gasped as his pressure broke from the wound. No, keep pressure. Don't let up. She needs." "You're done talking," Cole said, taking him down against the brick wall harder than Warren liked, but not hard enough to stop. The crowd at the alley entrance thickened, drawn by the terrible gravity of blood. Phones came out. Someone cursed. Someone said Calvin's name like it had always been proof waiting for a crime. Warren dropped to one knee beside Audrey and pressed a clean trauma pad from his kit to the wound. "Cole, cuffs, then clear the alley. Get EMS in here. Nobody else steps past that bin." "Copy." Calvin did not fight the cuffs. He twisted only once, trying to look back at Audrey. "Keep talking to her," he pleaded. "She was awake when I got here. I told her to look at me. Don't let her close her eyes." Warren looked at him for half a second. There was blood on Calvin's sleeves, his palms, his knees. Too much blood. The world loved a simple picture. The beloved baker on the ground, the homeless man above her, the frightened witness at the alley mouth. Warren had seen cases built from less. He had also seen lives ruined by less. "What happened?" Warren asked. Calvin swallowed hard. "I heard her scream. I came from the bus stop. Somebody ran, dark coat. I didn't chase because she was..." His voice broke. "She was bleeding." "You expect us to believe that?" Cole said. "I expect you to call the ambulance faster." The line landed strangely in the alley. Not defensive, not clever, just desperate. Warren heard the siren then, distant but growing, cutting through the festival music that had not yet fully stopped. He kept pressure on Audrey's shoulder and watched her breath fog weakly in the cold. Bishop stepped closer, nose working, then moved not toward Calvin but past him, toward the alley entrance where the crowd pressed against Cole's outstretched arm. The dog's ears rose. Warren followed the line of Bishop's stare, beyond the candle seller, beyond two teenagers filming, beyond the mayor's assistant with a hand over her mouth. A man in a dark work jacket with a snow service patch near the chest stood half-turned away from the alley. He was not running. That would have been easier to notice. He was doing something more careful than running. He was becoming part of the crowd while preparing to leave it. Bishop gave a low growl. It was not loud, not theatrical, not the kind of sound people tell stories about because they want to make themselves important. It was a controlled vibration from deep in the dog's chest, the warning Warren had heard only when Bishop had found something his training told him not to ignore. "Bishop," Warren said quietly. The dog did not look back. The man in the work jacket shifted one step into the shadow beside the tailor shop. Snow had collected on his shoulders. One gloved hand hung near his side, the other tucked against his ribs. Warren could not see his face clearly under the black knit cap. Cole pulled Calvin upright. "Let's go." The crowd reacted as if justice had already been done. A few people stepped back from Calvin like guilt could spread by contact. Calvin's shoulders folded inward, but he kept trying to look at Audrey as the EMTs entered the alley with their bags. "Tell them pressure high on the shoulder," he called. "Tell them she lost a lot, but she was breathing. Tell them." "Move," Cole said. That was when Bishop stepped directly into Calvin's path, not facing Calvin, not challenging Cole. The German shepherd placed himself between the cuffed old man and the mouth of the alley, body angled toward the crowd. His head lowered, shoulders tight beneath the black tactical harness, amber-brown eyes locked on the man in the snow service jacket. This time the growl made the front row of onlookers go silent. Cole froze. Warren's hand tightened around the leash. "Bishop, stand down." Bishop obeyed halfway. He stopped advancing, but he did not move aside. His gaze remained fixed beyond Calvin, beyond Cole, beyond the easy answer everyone had already chosen. Warren felt the old ache in his chest, the one that came whenever a scene asked him to decide too fast. Years ago, another case had looked clean in the first hour, a witness, a motive, a suspect who fit the town's fear. Warren had trusted the picture, and a man had spent months in a cell before a gas station camera miles away proved he could not have been there. Procedure had been followed. Reports had been signed. None of that had given the man his months back. "Hold him here," Warren said. Cole stared. "What? Hold him here. Do not put him in the car yet. He's covered in her blood. I can see that." Warren rose slowly, keeping Bishop at his side now. The man in the work jacket had moved farther back. Only a shoulder remained visible near the end of the alley. Warren's radio crackled. EMS called out Audrey's blood pressure. The candle seller was crying. The crowd murmured, angry and afraid, because people did not like uncertainty once they had found someone to carry it for them. Warren pointed to the alley exit. "Nobody leaves until we get names." "The whole crowd?" Cole asked. "Everyone close enough to see this alley." He looked down at Calvin, whose face had gone gray with cold and shock. "And keep him warm, he's shaking too hard." Calvin blinked as if the instruction hurt more than the cuffs. "She alive?" he whispered. Warren looked toward Audrey as the EMTs loaded her onto the stretcher. Her hand twitched once against the blanket. "She's alive." Calvin closed his eyes. For 1 second, the old man looked less like a suspect than a man who had been holding up a wall with his bare hands and had just learned it had not fallen yet. Warren turned back to Bishop. The dog stood motionless. Every line of him pointed toward the place where the man in the work jacket had disappeared into the edge of the market light. Warren did not uncuff Calvin. He did not apologize. He did not make promises he had no right to make. But the certainty that had tried to settle over the alley began to crack. Bishop had not told him Calvin was innocent. Dogs did not hand down verdicts. They did not understand town gossip, social shame, or the cruel convenience of blaming the person everyone already avoided. But Bishop had told him something in the only language a good K9 had. The danger was not where everyone was looking. Warren looked at the blood on the snow, the witness shaking beside the candle booth, Calvin's trembling hands locked behind his back, and the dark end of the alley beyond the bakery. Then he touched his radio mic and said, "I need this scene sealed tighter. No one leaves the rear lot. And someone find out who was wearing a Kellen snow and power jacket tonight." Bishop's growl faded, but his eyes did not soften. Warren understood. The arrest could wait a few more minutes. The truth had already started moving away. By the time Calvin Dorsey reached the Maple Glen police station, the story had already arrived ahead of him. It moved faster than the patrol car through the snowy streets, faster than the ambulance carrying Audrey Wells toward St. Agnes Medical, faster than truth had any hope of moving on a winter night, full of witnesses who had seen only enough to be certain. A homeless man had attacked Audrey behind the bakery. Calvin had finally done what people always feared he might do. The words passed from one market booth to another, from parents to teenagers, from a woman crying into her phone to a man who had not been near the alley, but repeated the story with the confidence of someone who had always expected it. Warren Holt heard pieces of it through the radio before he even stepped inside the station. Dispatch was trying to keep the line clear. Officers were asking for crowd control. Someone had posted a video from the alley entrance, shaky and useless except for the image of Calvin being led away in cuffs with blood on his coat. It was enough. In Maple Glen, enough was often whatever made people feel safe again. The station sat 2 blocks from Main Street, a square brick building, with old storm windows and fluorescent lights that made everyone look tired. Snow melted from Warren's boots as he brought Bishop through the side entrance. The dog shook once, harness straps creaking softly, then settled into work mode again, head level, ears listening to everything. Calvin was in interview room 2, still cuffed in front for now because his hands had to be processed. He sat wrapped in a gray emergency blanket that did not make him look any warmer. His hair was wet from melted snow, his face hollow under the ceiling light, his eyes fixed on a place somewhere between the table and the floor. Blood had dried in the creases of his fingers. It made his hands look older than the rest of him, as if they belonged to a man who had spent a lifetime holding things together and losing them anyway. Cole Ransom stood outside the room with a paper cup of coffee untouched in his hand. "He lawyered up?" Warren asked. "Not yet. Mostly keeps asking if Audrey is alive." Cole's jaw tightened. Could be guilt. Could be concern. Cole looked at him. "You saw him, Warren. I saw a man beside a wounded woman, covered in blood." "Beside a wounded woman," Warren repeated. Cole exhaled through his nose and glanced toward the squad room, where 2 officers were taking calls that sounded less like information and more like public anger. "People are losing it out there. Half the town wants to know why we haven't booked him already." Warren removed his gloves slowly. "Since when does half the town book our suspects?" Cole looked stung, but he did not back down. "Audrey feeds half those people. Gives kids cookies when their parents can't pay. Leaves bread outside the church if somebody hurt her." "If," Warren said. The word hung between them, small and heavy. Cole looked through the interview room glass at Calvin. "Audrey kicked him away from the bakery last month. Remember? Cold night, he tried sleeping behind the ovens by the rear door. She told him he couldn't stay there. She told him it was unsafe. He was angry. He was embarrassed." Cole shook his head. "That's a motive." Warren turned to him fully. "It's a possible emotion. Don't write it as motive until it earns the word." The younger deputy's face reddened. Warren knew he was pushing him, and not gently. He also knew Cole needed it now, before the report became a machine that no one could stop. Reports had gravity. A phrase placed wrong in the first hour could pull a whole investigation toward it. "Get the candle vendor's statement again," Warren said. "Exact words. Ask what she saw, not what she thinks happened. She said he was on top of Audrey. Did she see a strike?" Cole's mouth opened, then closed. "I don't know. Then find out. And write that she saw him kneeling beside Audrey after hearing the scream unless she gives you more." Cole stared at the coffee cup, then set it down on a file cabinet with more force than necessary. "You really think he didn't do it?" Warren looked through the glass. Calvin had raised his cuffed hands toward his face, but stopped before touching his eyes, as if he had remembered the blood. "I think Bishop was looking at someone else. Bishop's a dog, a trained one, still a dog." Warren's gaze did not move from Calvin. "Exactly. He doesn't care that Calvin sleeps behind the bus station. He doesn't care that Audrey is loved. He doesn't care what the town needs to believe by midnight. Cole had no answer to that. Inside the interview room, Calvin flinched when Warren entered, not a dramatic recoil, just a small tightening of the shoulders. Bishop stayed outside with the door open, lying down where he could see both the room and the hallway. Warren placed a recorder on the table, then sat across from Calvin. He did not start with accusation. He let the silence settle until the old man looked up. "Is she alive?" Calvin asked. His voice sounded scraped raw. "She was alive when they loaded her into the ambulance." Calvin closed his eyes. His lips moved without sound. It might have been a prayer, or a memory, or only a man counting breaths that were not his own. "I need you to tell me what happened from the beginning." Calvin swallowed. "I was under the bus awning." "At the station?" "Yes." "Why there?" A faint, humorless expression moved across Calvin's face. "Because the wind doesn't come sideways under that roof." Warren waited. "I heard her scream," Calvin said. "Not like people scream when they slip. This was the kind that ends fast because the air gets knocked out." His cuffed hands moved slightly on the table. "I ran. My knees aren't good, but I ran. To the alley behind the bakery." "Yes. What did you see?" Calvin's eyes shifted to the wall. "A man coming out from the back end. Dark coat, knit cap. He hit the trash bin with his hip, almost fell, then kept going toward the old garage." "Did you see his face?" "No. Build, not big, not small. Worked like he knew the ground." Warren leaned forward slightly. "What does that mean? People who live outside watch where they step. People who work in snow do too." He didn't stumble like a tourist. There it was again, that precision Warren had heard in the alley. Not polish, not education worn for show. Observation sharpened by survival. "Why didn't you follow him?" Calvin stared at him then, and for the first time something like anger lit behind the exhaustion. "Because she was bleeding." The room went very quiet. Calvin looked down at his hands. She was on her side, shoulder wound, blood under her. She tried to speak but couldn't. I put pressure where it was coming fastest. Kept her head turned so she wouldn't choke. Told her to look at me. People don't like to die when someone tells them to look. Warren felt something in that sentence land hard. "How did you know how to do that?" Calvin's jaw worked once. "Doesn't matter. It matters tonight." "No, it doesn't. Not to people out there. It matters to me." Calvin let out a soft laugh with no humor in it. "You already put cuffs on me." Warren did not defend it. "Yes." Calvin studied him for a long second, perhaps looking for mockery and finding none. "I drove an ambulance once," he said at last. "Boston. Long time ago. Paramedic? For a while." "How long?" Calvin looked away. "Long enough to know where to put my hands." He would not say more. Warren could have pressed, but grief had its own locked rooms, and breaking down every door was not the same as solving a case. He shifted instead. "The person who ran. Anything else? Smell, sound, clothing?" Calvin frowned, not because the question was strange, but because he was going back there. "Oil," he said slowly. "Machine oil and something sweet. Mint, maybe. Cigarettes." Warren kept his face still. "You sure?" Calvin looked at his hands again. "When you sleep near bus fumes, dumpsters, and wet cardboard, you learn what smells don't belong." Outside the room, Bishop raised his head. Warren saw it through the glass, a subtle movement. Ears forward, nose testing the air as an evidence tech came through the side door carrying sealed bags from the alley. The tech, a small woman named Harper, with a purple streak in her dark hair and the patient expression of someone used to being ignored until everyone needed her, placed the bags on the intake counter. Bishop rose, not pulling, not barking, but suddenly, completely interested. Warren stood. Calvin watched him. "Am I going to jail?" Warren paused at the door. "You're being held while we sort out what happened." "That's what jail is when you don't have anyone," Calvin said. Warren did not answer, because the old man was not wrong enough. In the hallway, Harper looked from Bishop to Warren. "Your dog's got opinions. What did you bring in?" "Clothing from the suspect, blood samples, a scrap of fabric from the brick edge near the bakery wall. Maybe nothing. Maybe from a coat." It was frozen into the slush. Warren gestured for her to set the bags down separately. Bishop passed Calvin's sealed coat first. He sniffed, then moved on. His reaction was professional, controlled, nearly dismissive. Blood, yes. Fear, cold, alley filth, human exhaustion. Nothing that changed his posture. Then Harper set down the small evidence sleeve containing the fabric scrap. Bishop stopped. His body aligned the way it had in the alley. The air around him seemed to tighten. He lowered his nose near the plastic, inhaled once, then looked toward the rear hallway that led to the parking lot and beyond it to Main Street. A low sound moved in his chest. Warren felt Cole come up behind him. "What is it?" Cole asked. "Fabric from the scene," Warren said. "Not Calvin's?" Harper checked the label. "Doesn't look like it. Dark synthetic outerwear, maybe work jacket. Smells terrible even through the bag." "Oil?" Warren asked. "Definitely. And menthol smoke? Unless my nose is broken." Cole looked at Calvin's coat, then at the smaller bag. "Calvin doesn't smoke. Not that I've seen." Warren turned toward the interview room. Through the glass, Calvin sat very still beneath the emergency blanket. A man already convicted in the minds of people who would never read a lab report. At that moment, the front door opened, and a woman stepped in carrying Winter on her shoulders and worry in her eyes. Mara Ellison did not look like someone who asked permission to care. She was 46, with dark hair tied low and a few silver strands loose at her temples, a gray olive parka dusted with snow, and a worn leather notebook clutched under one arm as if names themselves could freeze if she did not keep them close. Warren knew her from welfare checks, shelter disputes, overdose calls, and the kind of quiet emergencies that never made the paper. Cole muttered, "Great." Mara heard him. "Good evening to you too, Deputy." Her voice was tired, not weak. "I'm here for Calvin. He's being questioned in a felony assault," Cole said. "He needs an attorney, a blanket that isn't from the trunk of a cruiser, and someone in this building who remembers he's a human being." Cole bristled. Warren stepped in before it turned into something useless. "Mara, did Calvin ever work EMS?" Her expression changed, not surprise. "Confirmation. He told you?" "A piece of it." Mara looked toward the interview room. "Boston paramedic, before his wife died, before everything came apart. You can verify that?" "I can try. Some records are old, and Calvin hates paperwork like it personally betrayed him." She opened the notebook and flipped through pages filled with tight handwriting. "But I can tell you this. Last winter, he found Dale Mercer passed out behind the bus station during that cold snap. Everyone thought Dale was drunk and sleeping it off. Calvin checked his breathing, got him turned, kept him warm, and banged on the depot door until somebody called us. Dale would have died." Cole's voice softened despite himself. "Why didn't I hear about that?" Mara looked at him. "Because Calvin left before the ambulance came. Because Dale was embarrassed. Because nobody throws a parade for the homeless man who does something right." Warren let that sit. It did more work than any lecture could have. The station noise continued around them. Phones ringing, boots squeaking on wet tile, radios murmuring, the town pressing its anger against the walls. But for a few seconds the center of the room felt very still. Cole looked through the glass at Calvin with something less certain in his face. Not belief yet, but less certainty was a beginning. "Mara," Warren said, "did Audrey ever have trouble with Calvin?" "She set boundaries with him. That isn't trouble. He was angry when she wouldn't let him sleep behind the bakery. He was ashamed. There's a difference." Cole folded his arms. "You like him, that clouds your judgment." Mara turned to him fully, and disliking what he represents clouds yours. Warren almost smiled, but the moment was too grim for it. He looked at Harper. "Log the fabric rush priority. I want preliminary comparison with Calvin's coat and anything from the alley wall. Check for petroleum residue, smoke compounds, whatever you can get started tonight." Harper lifted her brows. "Tonight?" "Tonight. Then buy me coffee that doesn't taste like evidence locker dust." "Done." Cole followed Warren toward the back office. "You're really slowing this down." "I'm keeping it from running off a cliff. We have blood on him, a witness, a prior conflict with the victim, and he admitted he was there. We have blood consistent with contact. A witness who may not have seen an assault. A conflict you're inflating into motive, and an admission he stayed with a bleeding woman instead of running." Cole dragged both hands down his face. He looked young in that moment, younger than 31, young enough to resent the possibility that being fast and being right were not the same. The chief's going to want an arrest decision. The chief can want whatever he wants. The town wants one too. Warren glanced toward interview room 2. Calvin had leaned back, eyes closed, the emergency blanket slipping from one shoulder. He looked smaller than he had in the alley. Not innocent. Warren would not give him that word yet, but smaller, human. "The town isn't wearing this badge," Warren said. "We are." He went to the equipment rack and took down his winter jacket. Bishop stood before Warren even called him, ready, focused, as if the dog had been waiting for Warren to catch up to what the night had already told him. Cole saw the movement and shook his head. "Where are you going?" "Back to the alley. It's snowing harder." Scene techs already cleared what they could. They cleared what they knew to look for. "We've got a suspect in cuffs." Warren zipped his jacket, checked his radio, and clipped Bishop's lead back to the harness. "No," he said, looking once more at Calvin behind the glass, then at the small evidence bag that had changed the air in the station. "We have a man in cuffs. We don't have the truth yet." Cole stared at him for a long second. Then, with obvious reluctance, he grabbed his coat from the chair. "You're impossible, you know that?" Warren opened the rear door. Snow blew in across the tile, cold and clean and indifferent. Bishop stepped into it first. "Only when the first answer is too easy," Warren said, and followed the dog back into the night. The alley behind Wells Bakery looked smaller when the crowd was gone. Without the bodies pressing at its mouth, without the candle vendor crying, and Cole shouting orders, and Calvin Dorsey pleading over the scrape of handcuffs, it became what it had always been, a narrow service lane behind a beloved shop, lined with brick, trash bins, delivery crates, and a back door painted the same warm cream as Audrey Wells's storefront. Snow had begun falling harder. Not in violent sheets, but in patient flakes that settled over everything with the quiet persistence of a cover-up. Warren Holt stood at the alley entrance and let Bishop move first. The German shepherd lowered his head, took in the air, and moved slowly enough that Warren knew not to rush him. This was not a chase. This was reading. Snow could erase a footprint, blur a blood edge, soften the violence of what had happened. But it could also preserve the order of things for those who knew how to look before stepping on them. Cole followed behind with a flashlight, his earlier certainty wrapped tighter now under silence. "Scene techs already photographed," he said, but there was less challenge in his voice than before. "They got the main blood pool, the back door, the trash bins." "Good," Warren said. "Now we look at what they weren't afraid of missing." The rear bakery light flickered above them, buzzing faintly whenever the wind pushed loose ice against the wire running along the wall. The glow came and went, turning the snow from yellow to gray to blue. Warren imagined the scene as Calvin had described it. A scream, a man in a dark coat hitting the trash bin, Audrey on the ground, blood spreading, Calvin dropping to his knees. He moved to the place where Audrey had fallen and crouched, careful not to disturb the flagged markers left by Harper's team. The blood had soaked into the snow in a concentrated pool near the shoulder line, not scattered in arcs across the wall. Warren had seen enough assaults to know blood could lie, but patterns usually told the first truth before people told their preferred one. "Light here," he said. Cole angled the beam. Warren studied the marks left by Calvin's knees. 2 deep impressions in the slush, close to the blood pool, facing Audrey's head and shoulders. Not the stance of a man straddling a victim, not the wide, aggressive plant of someone leaning into violence. Knees down, weight forward, pressure applied. Warren heard Calvin's raw voice again. "Don't lift her. Keep her airway clear. Pressure here." "What?" Cole asked. Warren did not answer immediately. He pointed toward the brick wall. "If Calvin stabbed her or cut her from above..." "Where's the cast-off?" Cole frowned. "Could be on his clothes? Maybe. But he was close enough to be covered if he attacked. The blood on him is contact. Palms, cuffs, knees. You're not a blood spatter expert." "No. But I know the difference between a man trying to hide blood and a man who forgot he had it on him because he was busy keeping someone alive." Cole looked away first. Bishop moved past them toward the overturned trash bin near the alley's far end. The bin had been shoved sideways, its lid half buried in snow. Warren crouched beside it. A smear cut across the frost on its black plastic side, not blood, something darker and oily. The bin stood along the same path Calvin had claimed the fleeing man took. Bishop sniffed the smear, then stepped to the right, toward a narrow gap between the rear fence and the old garage property beyond. Warren rose and followed. The garage had been empty for years officially, It still had a faded sign over the side door promising brake service, tire rotation, and honest rates, though the broken windows and sagging gutter made the promise seem almost cruel. Bishop moved along the fence with growing focus, not excitement, not aggression, focus. His nose worked near the wire mesh, then stopped at a section where the metal had bent outward slightly. Warren knelt and saw it. A small metal button caught in the fence, dark and round, with a trace of black thread still looped through its back. Not a cheap plastic coat button. He took a photo before touching anything, then used gloves and tweezers to place it in a paper evidence fold from his pocket. Cole aimed the flashlight at the snow below. Warren. There, half-covered but still readable, was a boot print. The sole had a distinctive pattern, wide chevrons down the center, small square studs along the outside edge. Work boot, winter tread, not the nearly smooth soles Calvin had been wearing when they processed him. Warren photographed the print from multiple angles, measuring with the small ruler from his field kit. "That doesn't prove the attacker," Cole said, though the sentence sounded like he was saying it because someone had to. "No," Warren agreed. "It proves Calvin wasn't the only man in this alley tonight." A gust pushed snow through the fence, and the backlight buzzed out completely for 3 seconds. Darkness swallowed them. In those seconds, Warren saw another night, another alley, another man pressed against a cruiser while Warren accepted the easy answer. The case had been 8 years ago, a robbery outside a liquor store in Rutland County. A clerk with a bleeding mouth, a suspect with a prior record. A witness who said she was certain until the camera from a closed gas station showed the suspect buying cigarettes 12 miles away at the same time. The man had spent 4 months in jail before the mistake surfaced. Warren had followed policy. He had written clean reports. The prosecutor had apologized in language that avoided blame. None of it had erased the way the man's mother looked at Warren after the dismissal, as if a badge could apologize only after it had already taken something it could never return. The bakery light came back. Cole was watching him. "You okay?" "Yeah, you went somewhere." Warren looked at the boot print. "That's why we looked twice." Cole's face shifted, not softening exactly, but lowering its guard. For a young deputy, doubt felt like weakness. Warren knew it could be the beginning of real police work. They checked the bakery camera next. Audrey's office behind the kitchen was small, warm, and unbearable in its ordinary details. A ledger lay open beside a mug of tea, gone cold. Flour dust marked the edge of the desk. A blue-covered notebook sat near the register receipt printer, but Warren left it untouched for now. This chapter of the night belonged to the alley, not Audrey's private papers. Cole accessed the security feed using the code Audrey had once given the department for emergency checks. The video from the rear camera was not blank, but it might as well have been for anyone wanting certainty. The angle leaned too far left because the gutter above it had been bent inward. The delivery driver who clipped it 2 days ago had probably cursed, apologized, and driven away without knowing he had changed the value of a future murder investigation. At 6:17 p.m., the screen showed the alley mouth, blowing snow, the back edge of Audrey's coat as she stepped outside with a trash bag. At 6:18, a dark shape appeared near the far end, too distorted by flickering light to identify. Audrey turned sharply. Her body language changed before the figure touched her. She knew him, or at least recognized him. The camera recorded no clear face, only movement, an arm, a recoil, the trash bin jolting, Audrey falling out of frame. Then, seconds later, another figure entered from the near end, stumbling hard, coat flapping open. Calvin. He dropped to the ground beside her, not on top of her. His hands moved to her shoulder. He looked toward the alley mouth and shouted. There was no audio, but Warren could see the shape of urgency in his body. Cole stared at the screen for a long time. "He came after," he said quietly. "Looks that way. Maybe he circled around." Warren did not look away from the frozen frame. Maybe. But now that theory has to do more work. At St. Agnes Medical, the emergency entrance smelled of wet coats, disinfectant, and burnt coffee. Warren left Bishop with the K9 unit crate in the cruiser, window cracked and heater running, because a hospital full of frightened relatives did not need a working dog entering without purpose. Cole came with him, quieter than he had been all night. Dr. Lena Whitcomb met them outside Trauma 2, A tall woman in teal scrubs with auburn hair clipped back and the kind of tired green eyes that could separate panic from information without raising her voice. "Officer Holt," she said, pulling off one glove. She's still critical but stable for now. Shoulder wound missed the artery by less than I like to think about. She lost blood, but your EMTs got her here fast. Was pressure applied before EMS arrived? Warren asked. Lena's gaze sharpened slightly. Yes, good pressure. Correct location. Whoever did it understood bleeding control. Cole shifted beside him. Could someone fake that? Lena looked at him with professional patience. People can fake concern. They usually don't fake effective hemorrhage control under stress by accident. Warren asked, would moving her have made it worse? Possibly. If someone had dragged her upright or rolled her wrong, yes. She had a mild head impact, too. Keeping her on her side and maintaining pressure was the right call. She paused, reading what was not being said. You have someone in custody? We have someone detained, Warren said. Lena gave a small nod, approving the distinction. Then detain your certainty, too. The words were not dramatic. They were clinical, almost dry. That made them hit harder. Before Warren could answer, his phone vibrated. The name on the screen was Chief Mallory, but the voice behind the pressure belonged to the whole town. Holt, the chief said, Mayor Pritchard is getting calls from the market committee, local press, Audrey's customers, half the business owners on Main. They want to know if we've charged Dorsey. Warren stepped away from Cole and Lena. Not yet. Why not? Because the scene is not matching the first story. A pause. Explain. Warren did briefly. The camera angle, Calvin entering after the first figure, the fabric, the boot print, the contact blood, Audrey's treatment. The chief listened without interruption, which was why Warren had lasted under her longer than under anyone else. You can hold him while you work it, she said finally. But don't let this become a philosophy seminar, Warren. The town is scared. Warren looked through the glass into Trauma 2, where Audrey lay beneath clean white light, tubes and monitors making her look both alive and terribly far away. Scared towns make bad witnesses. So do stubborn cops. Then it's good I brought evidence. The chief sighed. Keep me updated. And Holt? Yeah, don't be wrong loudly. The line went dead. Lena, who had clearly heard enough to understand, folded her arms. For what it's worth, the man who held pressure bought her time. I'll put that in my report. Thank you. Cole walked to the window of Audrey's room and looked in. She's always nice to everyone, he said, as if that fact had become harder, not easier, to carry. That's why people want a monster, Warren said. A monster makes the hurt feel organized. Cole did not answer. A nurse leaned out from Trauma 2. Doctor, she's stirring. Lena turned at once. Warren and Cole stepped back, but Lena waved Warren closer after checking Audrey's vitals. Only one officer. Quiet. Warren entered the room slowly. Audrey's face was pale against the pillow, lips dry, a bruise darkening near her temple. She looked smaller than she had behind the bakery counter, but not erased. Lena touched her shoulder gently. Audrey, you're at St. Agnes. You're safe. Officer Holt is here. Can you hear me? Audrey's eyes moved beneath heavy lids. Her breathing caught. Warren leaned closer but did not crowd her. Audrey, it's Warren. You don't need to explain everything. Just listen to Dr. Whitcomb. Her fingers shifted against the sheet. For a moment, he thought she had slipped under again. Then her eyes opened a fraction, unfocused but afraid. Calvin, she whispered. Warren felt the room tighten. Calvin was there, he said carefully. Do you remember him? Audrey's lips trembled. The monitor ticked faster. Lena touched her wrist. Easy. Audrey forced air through her throat, each word dragging itself up from somewhere deep and damaged. Not him. Cole, visible through the glass, went still. Warren leaned in just enough to hear. Audrey's eyes fixed on nothing, or on the memory of the alley light flickering above her. The other one. Her voice thinned, came back. Lena placed a hand on Warren's arm, warning him not to push. Audrey's eyes closed again, and the machines kept their rhythm as if nothing had changed. But something had. Not enough to free Calvin. Not enough to name the man in the dark coat. Not enough to satisfy a frightened town or calm a mayor afraid of headlines. But enough to change the shape of the night. Warren stepped back into the hallway. Cole looked at him, and whatever certainty he had been clinging to had cracked all the way through. She said not him. She did. And someone came back. Warren looked toward the hospital exit, where snow moved beyond the glass like static. He thought of the figure on the camera, the boot print by the fence, the metal button in the evidence fold, Bishop's body angled toward the crowd instead of Calvin, and the work jacket disappearing at the edge of the market light. "Call the station," Warren said. "Tell them Calvin Dorsey is not to be booked on assault until I say so." He stays detained, warm, medically checked, and watched. Cole nodded. "And us?" Warren was already moving. "We find out who had a reason to come back to that alley." By morning, Maple Glen had chosen 2 men without being asked to. Calvin Dorsey was the one people lowered their voices around, the one they remembered sleeping under the bus awning, the one whose old coat and unsteady walk made him easy to place inside a violent story. Travis Kellen was the other kind of man, the one people waved to from porches, the one who cleared driveways before breakfast and refused payment from widows if the storm had been bad enough, the one whose tan work jacket with Kellen Snow and Power stitched over the chest had become as familiar in winter as road salt and chimney smoke. Warren Holt sat at his desk with 3 lists spread before him, names taken from the market crowd, statements from officers at the scene, and local service permits for snow removal and generator repair. Bishop lay beside the desk, still wearing his black harness, eyes half closed but ears awake. Cole leaned against the file cabinet, arms folded, staring at Travis's name as if it had personally offended him. "He was helping with traffic cones near the square," Cole said. "Half the committee saw him." "At what time?" Warren asked. "Around 6. Audrey was attacked at 6:18. Cole pushed off the cabinet and came closer. "Main Street to the bakery alley is 2 minutes if you cut behind the tailor shop. Less if you already know the service route." Cole did not answer. Warren watched him struggle with the discomfort of the wrong kind of suspect. Travis Kellen did not fit the ugly picture people had already hung in their minds. He was 43, solidly built from winter labor, with a trimmed beard, a practiced smile, and a way of calling older women mom that made them forgive him for tracking snow onto their rugs. Warren had spoken to him plenty of times after storms, minor accidents, blocked roads, elderly residents needing generators restarted. Travis always arrived with tools, coffee breath, and an easy line about how Vermont winter kept honest men busy. Men like that were not invisible. That was part of the problem. People mistook visibility for innocence. Warren pulled Travis's statement closer. "He says he was at the north end of the square when he heard screaming. That's what he told Harper, too. He also says he reached the alley after Calvin was already in cuffs." Cole frowned. "That's wrong. He was in the crowd before Calvin came out." "I know." Warren tapped the statement with one finger. Bishop knew, too. Cole's jaw tightened. He had seen it now in his own memory. Travis standing close enough to watch, close enough to hear Calvin, then stepping back when Bishop blocked the path. Not fleeing, not panicking, just adjusting, like a man who understood that stillness could be a disguise. Warren stood and reached for his coat. "We start with people who had Travis in their homes." "Based on what?" "Based on Audrey's notebook, if we can find it. Based on Mara saying there's been a pattern. Based on a button, a boot print, a fabric scrap, and a victim saying another man came back." Cole followed him out, but not with the old argument in his stride. The first house belonged to Ruth Bellamy, 81, a retired librarian whose small white cottage sat behind a pair of blue spruce trees bent under snow. Mara Ellison met them there. Gray olive parka buttoned to her chin, notebook in hand, her expression saying she had been waiting for police to ask the right question for longer than anyone wanted to admit. Ruth answered the door with a cane in one hand and suspicion in the other. She was tiny, silver-haired, wrapped in a cardigan the color of oatmeal, and she looked past Warren at Cole as if youth itself had become unreliable. "If this is about Audrey, I already told Mara I don't want trouble. We're trying to prevent more of it," Warren said. Ruth let them in. Her living room smelled of lemon polish and old books. Bishop remained outside with Cole on the porch, not because Warren distrusted him, but because fragile trust sometimes entered a room more easily without a police dog beside it. Mara sat near Ruth, not too close, and asked about the missing ring. Ruth's fingers folded into her lap. "It was my sister's, amethyst, not worth much. When did it go missing?" Warren asked gently. Ruth looked embarrassed. which told him more than anger would have. After Travis fixed the generator, I thought I misplaced it. People my age misplace things. That's what everyone says before they start saying worse things. Did you report it? Report what? An old woman losing a ring? Her eyes sharpened. Travis shoveled my walk for free 3 times last year. He called me Mrs. Bellamy when half the town calls me Ruthie like I'm a child. You want to accuse a man like that? You'd better be more certain than I was. The next 2 visits carried the same shape with different furniture. A retired mechanic missing prescription pain medication after a furnace repair. A widower missing $40 from a kitchen jar after Travis restarted his generator during a power outage. None of them had wanted to report it. None wanted to accuse a helpful man. All of them had spoken to Audrey at the bakery because Audrey had a way of listening without making shame worse. By late afternoon, Warren, Cole, and Mara returned to Wells Bakery with a key Audrey's assistant had given them. The shop was closed, blinds drawn, a handwritten sign on the door reading closed for family emergency, though Audrey had no family nearby in the way people meant when they wrote signs. Inside, the warmth had gone out of the room. The display case was empty except for 3 unsold maple rolls wrapped in plastic. Flour still dusted the counter edge, and a row of paper bags stood ready for customers who would not come that day. Warren stood behind the counter and felt a strange tenderness for the order Audrey had left behind. Violence always looked worse when surrounded by evidence of ordinary care. Mara went straight to the lower shelf near the register. She kept notes, she said, not official. Audrey wasn't trying to play detective. She just didn't like patterns being dismissed because the people involved were old, poor, or embarrassed. She found the blue notebook tucked behind a box of receipt paper. Its cover was soft from use, a small grease stain near the corner. Warren opened it carefully. Audrey's handwriting was neat, rounded, more suited to cake orders than suspicion. Names, dates, service calls, missing items. Ruth Bellamy, generator restart. Travis Kellen, amethyst ring noticed missing 2 days later. Dale Mercer, snowblower repair, medication short. Paul Evers, driveway clearing, cash jar low. At the bottom of one page, Audrey had written a line that made Warren stop. People keep thanking him for entering their homes. No one checks what leaves with him. Cole read it over Warren's shoulder and went very still. The words did not shout. They did not accuse Travis in legal terms. They did something worse for Cole. They made the pattern visible. My mom called him last month, Cole said quietly. Warren looked up. For what? Battery backup on her furnace. He came by after I couldn't get there. Cole swallowed, eyes moving across Audrey's notes as if he expected to find his mother's name waiting. He wouldn't take money. I thought that was decent. Mara's voice was softer than usual. Sometimes decency is real. Sometimes it's a key. Cole stepped back from the notebook. His face had gone pale in a way the cold could not explain. I told Calvin he had motive because Audrey wouldn't let him sleep behind the bakery. Warren closed the notebook but kept his hand on it. You were trying to make the facts line up with the man you expected. And Travis, the town made him line up with the man it wanted. Cole looked toward the dark bakery windows, beyond which Main Street was beginning to glow again. For another winter evening no one knew how to cancel. How do you tell the difference? Warren picked up the notebook. You stop asking which man looks safer. You ask which story has to ignore more evidence to survive. That stayed with Cole. Warren saw it land and remain there, uncomfortable but useful. For the first time since the alley, the young deputy did not reach for a faster answer. He reached for the back of a chair, sat down, and rubbed both hands over his face, like someone finally feeling the weight of a badge rather than the shine of it. They took the notebook into evidence, photographed each page, and logged the chain of custody properly. Warren would not let a good lead die from sloppy handling. Travis was not a suspect because he seemed wrong. He was a suspect because Audrey had written down the shape of his access, because a boot print did not match Calvin, because a fabric scrap smelled of oil and menthol smoke, because Bishop had locked onto him twice, and because the timeline Travis gave was starting to fold under its own neatness. At the station, Chief Mallory authorized a quiet background check but warned Warren again that Mayor Pritchard wanted control of the message. The message, Warren said, is that we are investigating. The mayor wants reassurance. Then tell him reassurance is not evidence. You say that like it won't cost me 3 phone calls and a headache. I'll buy you coffee. Buy me a suspect who doesn't have half the town ready to defend him. Warren almost said he already had one, but stopped. That was the trap, too. He would not convict Travis in his head just to balance the way the town had convicted Calvin. He would build the case, or he would not. That evening, he drove to St. Agnes to check on Audrey's condition and deliver a copy of the notebook log for the medical legal file. Cole came with him, unusually quiet. Bishop rode in the rear K9 compartment, head raised, eyes reflecting passing streetlights. The hospital looked brighter than it felt, glass doors shining against fresh snow, wreaths hung above the entrance, a volunteer at the desk wearing a red sweater, and the stunned expression of someone who had answered too many calls about Audrey. Dr. Lena Whitcomb met Warren near the nurse's station. "She's sedated again," Lena said. "Stable but weak. Don't expect more tonight." "Did she say anything else?" "No, but she became agitated when a male visitor asked about her." Warren's posture changed. "Who?" Lena glanced toward the waiting area. "Local man. Said he was a friend. Brought flowers." Warren turned before she finished. Travis Kellen stood near the hallway leading to Audrey's room, holding a bouquet of white lilies wrapped in green paper. In the hospital light, he looked exactly like the man Maple Glen believed him to be. Concerned, clean enough, cheeks red from cold, work jacket zipped, knit cap in one hand, beard trimmed close. He saw Warren and gave a small nod, the kind men give police when they want to appear cooperative without seeming nervous. "Officer Holt," Travis said. "Heard Audrey was stable. Thought I'd bring something. Whole town's praying." The smell reached Warren a half second before Bishop reacted. Menthol smoke under winter air, machine oil ground into work gloves. Not illegal, not proof. But Bishop came through the automatic doors with Cole, and the change was immediate. The dog's head snapped toward Travis, his body lowered, shoulders firm beneath the harness. He moved in front of the hallway to Audrey's room and stopped there, not lunging, not barking wildly, but blocking the path with the same controlled warning he had shown in the alley. A low growl filled the polished hospital corridor. Nurses looked up. Cole froze. Travis's smile stayed, but it thinned at the edges. "That dog got a problem with flowers?" he asked lightly. Warren took Bishop's leash and felt the tremor of contained force through the line. "He has a problem with people who stand too close to protected witnesses." "Witnesses?" Travis repeated. Too fast, one word, and the concern slipped just enough for Warren to see calculation move behind it. Lena's eyes flicked from Travis to Warren. Cole's hand drifted near his belt, not to draw, just to remember where everything was. Bishop did not take his eyes off Travis. Warren did not accuse him. Not there, not without more. But the hallway had changed. The beloved helper, the man who fixed furnaces and cleared driveways and carried lilies into hospitals, stood on one side of the K9. Audrey's closed door stood on the other. Warren finally understood what Bishop had been doing from the beginning. The dog had not been defending Calvin as a man. He had been guarding the fragile space between the truth and whoever wanted to get close enough to bury it. "Leave the flowers at the desk," Warren said. Travis looked at him, then at Bishop, then toward Audrey's door. "Sure," he said, "whatever you need." He placed the lilies on the counter with careful hands and walked back toward the exit. Bishop's growl faded only after the automatic doors closed behind him. Warren watched Travis disappear into the falling snow beyond the glass. Beside him, Cole whispered, "That wasn't about Calvin." Warren kept his eyes on the doors. "No," he said, "it never was." The first proof that Calvin Dorsey had once belonged to the world arrived as a fax from Boston that came through crooked and pale, as if even the machine did not quite believe what it was printing. Mara Ellison stood beside Warren Holt in the records corner of the Maple Glen station, her hands wrapped around a paper cup she had not touched. Cole Ransom hovered near the doorway, pretending not to wait for the page. Bishop lay under Warren's desk, head on his paws, watching the room with the patience of a creature that did not need paperwork to know when people were changing their minds. The fax whined, clicked, and pushed out a grainy copy of an old commendation from Boston Emergency Medical Services. Warren picked it up carefully. The photograph was nearly black in places, but the man in it was unmistakably Calvin, younger by 20 years, broader in the shoulders, clean-shaven, wearing a dark paramedic jacket with reflective stripes. He was kneeling beside a flipped bus in winter slush, one gloved hand holding the hand of a little girl trapped between twisted seats. The caption beneath the image read, "Paramedic Calvin Dorsey credited with keeping child conscious during Fenway bus rollover, February 2002. Warren read the words twice. Cole came closer without speaking. Mara looked away first, not because she was surprised, but because being right about a forgotten person did not feel like victory when the proof arrived so late. "There's more," she said. His supervisor sent a note. Calvin worked EMS for 14 years, field training officer for 6, multiple trauma commendations. Warren turned the pages, reports, service dates. A short letter from an old captain named Dennis Arbor, who wrote in the blunt language of someone who had seen too much to decorate truth. Dorsey was one of the best hands I ever had on a bleeding patient. Calm voice, fast assessment, stayed with people when others gave up. Lost his wife in 2008. After that, he started missing shifts. We tried to keep him. He disappeared before we could help him right. The last sentence bothered Warren more than the rest. Disappeared before we could help him right. It sounded almost gentle until he heard what it really meant. A man fell, and everyone watched him become harder to reach, then called that vanishing a choice. Mara took the page from Warren and smoothed the crease with her thumb. "Her name was Elaine," she said quietly, "his wife. Cancer. He told me once, years ago, when he was drunk enough to forget he hated being known. She used to pack 2 lunches for his shifts because he always gave one away to somebody who hadn't eaten." Cole swallowed. "Why didn't he tell us any of this?" Mara looked at him. "Would you have believed him last night?" Cole's eyes dropped. The answer sat between them without needing sound. Warren carried the papers into interview room 2. Calvin sat at the table again, no longer cuffed to the wall but still not free, a blanket around his shoulders and a foam cup of water untouched near his hand. Someone had found him a clean sweatshirt from the station donation bin, but he still looked like a man wearing borrowed mercy. He saw the papers and stiffened. "Mara shouldn't have done that," he said. "She thought we needed the truth." "That ain't the truth," Calvin muttered. "That's a dead man with my name." Warren sat across from him. He knew how to save people. Calvin's mouth twitched with something too bitter to be a smile. Lots of men know how to do something before they forget how to live. Warren turned the old photo around and slid it across the table. Calvin did not touch it. His eyes went to the little girl's hand in the picture, then away. For a moment, Warren saw the alley again. Calvin's bloody palms pressed to Audrey's wound. Calvin shouting for someone to keep her awake. Calvin staying when running would have been easier. The past had not vanished from him. It had been buried under cold, shame, and years of being looked through. But when someone bled in front of him, the buried part had climbed out first. "The girl lived?" Warren asked. Calvin stared at the table. "She sang the same song for 20 minutes because I told her if she stopped, I'd have to sing, and nobody wanted that." "What song?" "You Are My Sunshine." His face tightened. "Don't put that in a report." Warren nodded. He had no intention of turning the last intact pieces of Calvin's dignity into evidence unless the case demanded it. Calvin finally looked up. "Audrey? Stable, still critical. She say anything? Enough to know she does not think you attacked her." The old man closed his eyes. His shoulders dropped, but relief did not make him lighter. It seemed to take away the only structure holding him upright. "I told her to look at me," he whispered. "She did. For a second. She looked so scared." Warren leaned back. "Tell me again about the man who ran." Calvin rubbed his wrists, though the cuffs were gone. "Dark coat. Work coat, maybe. Not long. He hit the trash bin." He coughed, dry cough, like it sat in his chest, and the smell, oil and mint smoke. "Menthol? Yeah. Strong. Like he'd been smoking with gloves on." Warren wrote it down. Calvin watched the pen move. "You believe me now?" The question was not hopeful. It was a test Calvin expected the world to fail. Warren answered carefully. "I believe parts of what you said match evidence we found." Calvin gave a small, broken laugh. "That's police for almost human." Warren did not correct him because Calvin had earned some anger. "At St. Agnes Medical, Dr. Lena Whitcomb stood over a lab request form with her auburn hair clipped up messily and a black stethoscope hanging low around her neck. She looked less composed than the night before, not because she was uncertain, but because exhaustion had begun cutting through the clean edges of her professionalism. "Audrey's still sedated," she told Warren when he arrived. "But there's something you need to know." She led him to a side counter where a sealed evidence envelope waited for transfer. "We collected material from under her fingernails. Skin cells, possibly. She fought hard enough to scratch someone. Calvin had no fresh scratches." Warren said, "I checked the intake photos. Then whoever she scratched may still be carrying the mark." Lena signed the chain of custody form and gave him a look that made the next part clear before she said it. "This does not prove your detained man innocent. It proves the victim had contact with someone else forcefully enough to leave biological material. That may be enough for a warrant." "Good. Because the person who held pressure saved time, but the person she scratched put her here." Warren took the envelope. As he left the hospital, his phone buzzed with a message from Harper. "Fabric scrap, preliminary visual match to industrial snow service outerwear. Petroleum residue present. Menthol tobacco odor noted. Full lab pending. Not enough alone, but useful." He read it once, then again, and stood for a moment beneath the hospital awning while snow hissed against the parking lot. Across town, Travis Kellen was still moving through Maple Glen as a trusted man. He could buy coffee, shake hands, complain about crime, and be believed before he finished speaking. Calvin had needed a fax from Boston and a half-dead woman's whisper just to be considered possibly decent. That imbalance pressed against Warren harder than the cold. By mid-afternoon, he requested a search warrant for Travis Kellen's garage. The judge on duty, a gray-voiced man working remotely from Montpelier, was not easily moved by narrative. Warren gave him facts. Audrey's notes linking Travis' service visits to missing items, the timeline inconsistency, the boot print near the garage fence, the button, the fabric scrap, Bishop's K9 alert as behavior but not probable cause, the hospital visit, Audrey's statement, and the pending nail scrapings. The judge listened, asked sharp questions, then said what Warren had feared. "You're close, Officer Holt, but I want stronger linkage between the garage and the assault before I authorize a full search. Get me a clearer comparison, a witness, or victim identification when she can provide it." The call ended with legal restraint and practical frustration. Cole was in the squad room when Warren came out. "No warrant? Not yet. Travis gets to walk, for now." Cole stared through the window toward Main Street, where two men were hanging fresh lights above the bakery even though it remained closed. "He's talking." "Who?" "Travis, at the diner. I went to grab coffee and heard him telling people we're bending over backward for a dangerous homeless guy because Mara made noise and you've got a soft spot." Cole's expression twisted, not with anger alone, but with embarrassment at having once stood close to that same opinion. He said Calvin fooled Audrey because she was too kind. Said next time it could be someone's kid. Warren's eyes hardened. "He's trying to make the town useful." "Yeah," Cole said. "I think he is." That was the first time Cole said it without resisting the implication. Later, Cole went to the holding area alone. Warren watched through the glass panel but did not interrupt. The younger deputy carried no coffee, no paperwork, no accusation. He stood inside the door with his hat in his hands like a man entering a room where he had already done damage. Calvin sat on the bench, blanket around him, staring at the floor. "Mr. Dorsey," Cole said. Calvin looked up slowly. "Deputy." The word held no warmth. Cole accepted it. "I need to ask you something again. Not because I'm trying to trap you." Calvin's eyes narrowed. "That's usually when the trap starts." Cole breathed out. "Fair." He sat on the chair opposite him, leaving space. "The man who ran, you said he coughed. Was it before he ran, after, or while he was near Audrey?" Calvin frowned, pulled back into the memory. "After, near the far end. He hit the bin, cursed under his breath, coughed twice, then ran." "Did he say anything you remember?" "No words. Just the curse. Voice?" "Rough local maybe. Not old, not young." Cole nodded. He did not rush to fill the silence. That, more than any apology, told Calvin something had changed. And the smell was strong. Oil and mint cigarettes, heavy on his gloves. I smelled it when I leaned over Audrey, like he'd been close to her. Cole looked down at his hands. I was wrong to assume. Calvin studied him. That an apology? Not a good one. No. Calvin leaned back against the wall. But it's better than being called a liar. Cole looked up. I'm sorry. Calvin did not forgive him. He did not need to. But he nodded once, and Cole took it as more than he deserved. Evening came early under a low ceiling of clouds. Harper's preliminary comparison arrived, just as the station lights flickered from ice on the lines. The fabric from the fence was not merely similar in color. Its weave, reflective backing, and synthetic insulation matched the manufacturer used in Kellen Snow and Power jackets. Still preliminary, still not a courtroom victory, but close enough that Warren felt the case shift under his feet. He was reaching for his phone to call Chief Mallory when dispatch spoke from across the room.
Officer Holt?
Warren turned. Unit just drove past Kellen's garage on Lincoln Spur. Lights are off. Bay door is closed. Truck's not in the lot. Cole stood at once. He's usually open till 7 during storm weeks. Warren looked down at Bishop. The German Shepherd had already risen, ears forward, body ready before the command came. Warren clipped the leash to the harness and felt the dog's contained focus travel up the line into his hand. Calvin Dorsey's old photo lay on Warren's desk, the young paramedic kneeling in winter slush beside a child who had lived because he stayed. Warren looked at it once before moving. Then he grabbed his coat and said, "Find me Travis Kellen before he decides what else needs to disappear." Audrey Wells woke just before noon with winter light lying flat across the hospital blinds and the taste of metal still caught in the back of her throat. Dr. Lena Whitcomb had warned Warren Holt not to expect much. Trauma did not respect police timelines, and a body that had almost bled itself empty was not a witness stand. Still, Audrey's eyes opened with a clarity that changed the room. She looked first at Lena, then at Warren, then at the doorway, as if some part of her had remained in the alley long after the ambulance took her away. "Calvin," she whispered. Warren stepped closer, careful to keep his hands visible and his voice low. Cole stood outside the glass, no longer pushing to be the first man in the room. "He's alive," Warren said. "He's at the station. He stayed with you until EMS arrived." Audrey's eyes filled before any sound came. It was not relief exactly. It was the grief of realizing someone else had been punished for not leaving. "He didn't hurt me." Lena touched Audrey's wrist. Slowly, only what you can manage, Audrey swallowed, pain tightening her face. "Travis, behind the bakery. I asked him about Ruth's ring, Dale's pills, Paul's cash. I had it written down." Her fingers moved weakly against the sheet, like she was still trying to hold the little blue notebook. "He laughed first. Said old people lose things. Said I was making trouble." Warren did not interrupt. "I told him I was going to the police." Audrey continued, each sentence costing her. "He grabbed for the notebook. I pulled back. He shoved me against the wall. I remember the light going out, then back on. There was a knife. I thought he was going to take the book and run, but he—" She stopped, breath catching. Lena leaned in, but Audrey shook her head once, determined now in a way that made her look less fragile than the machines around her suggested. "Calvin came after. I saw him. He put his hands on my shoulder and told me not to sleep. Travis came back in the crowd. I saw his jacket near the alley mouth before everything went dark." Warren felt the last loose piece of the night slide into place. Not enough for closure, enough for action. "Audrey."
Did Calvin attack you at any point?
Audrey's eyes locked onto his. "No." The word was quiet but clean. "He saved me." Cole turned away from the glass. Warren saw his reflection in it, young, pale, ashamed, but still standing there. That mattered. A man could be wrong and still choose what he did next. Within 40 minutes, Audrey's statement, Lena's medical findings, Harper's preliminary fiber comparison, the boot print photographs, and the blue notebook had done what none of them could do alone. The judge authorized the search of Kellen Snow and Power's garage on Lincoln Spur. Chief Mallory approved the operation with a voice like gravel and caution. "Do it clean," she told Warren over the radio. "No cowboy work. Backup is 10 minutes out because Route 9 is iced over." "Understood." "And Holt? Yeah, bring me evidence, not just a story." Warren looked through the windshield at the low gray sky and the industrial edge of Maple Glen ahead. Bishop sat alert in the rear K9 compartment, black and tan body still, amber brown eyes forward. Cole rode beside Warren, one hand resting on his knee, not on his weapon, not on his radio, just curled there as if holding down something inside himself. She said he saved her, Cole said. I heard it too. I just don't know what to do with it yet. Warren drove past a row of storage sheds and a snow-choked lumber yard. You do the next right thing. That simple? No, but simple and easy aren't the same. Kellen Snow and Power occupied a squat metal garage near the old rail line, where winter weeds stuck through cracked asphalt and abandoned tracks cut behind the lot toward the dark pines. The main sign showed a cartoon snowplow pushing a cheerful blue drift. The bay windows were dark, though tire marks showed recent movement in the snow. A plow truck sat inside the rear service bay, visible through a narrow gap in the metal door. Warren parked at an angle that blocked the main drive. Cole took the side, Bishop at heel beside Warren, harness tight, body low with readiness but waiting for command. Police, Warren called, pounding on the office door. Travis Kellen, we have a warrant. No answer. Cole looked through the side window. Office is empty. Warren tried the handle. Locked. He used the key code Audrey had written in her notes for after-hours generator emergencies. It failed. Cole moved to the bay door and stopped. Warren. The side service door had not latched fully. A thin wedge of heat breathed through it, carrying the smell of oil, rubber, metal shavings, and menthol tobacco. Bishop's ears went forward. Warren drew his weapon but kept it low. Bishop, heel. The dog obeyed, close and controlled. They entered into the garage's dim interior, where fluorescent lights flickered over workbenches, snowblowers, tool chests, and plastic storage bins stacked along the far wall. The place looked ordinary at first, and that disturbed Warren more than chaos would have. Ordinary places could hold ugly things for years if people liked the owner enough. Cole cleared the office with Warren covering. No Travis, no immediate movement. Then Bishop stopped beside the storage bins. He sniffed once and looked back at Warren. Mark it, Warren said. Cole opened the first bin with gloved hands. Inside were labeled envelopes of cash, women's watches, pill bottles, old coins, house keys tagged with masking tape, and a small purple ring wrapped in tissue. Ruth Bellamy's amethyst. The second bin held wallets, spare prescription pads, a silver locket, and an envelope with Audrey's name written on it in Travis's blocky handwriting. Cole stared down into the plastic container as if he were looking into a hole the whole town had helped dig. My mother let him into her kitchen, he said. Warren did not answer. Across the garage, Bishop had moved to a black oil drum near the far workbench. He stood rigid, nose angled toward the lid. Warren signaled Cole, then lifted the drum lid with a pry tool. The smell rose thick and foul. Floating near the top of the dark waste oil was a pair of work gloves sealed badly inside a plastic grocery bag. Red-brown staining had leaked against the inside of the plastic. Cole whispered something under his breath that might have been a prayer or a curse. Warren photographed the bag in place. Call it in. We need evidence response and full backup. Travis is arrestable. Cole reached for his radio. That was when the rear bay roared to life. The plow truck's engine turned over with a violent cough, headlights blasting white through the dim garage. Travis Kellen had been in the rear compartment the whole time, hidden behind the truck and the stacked salt pallets, waiting for the moment their attention moved to the evidence. Move! Warren shouted. The truck lurched backward, smashing through the half-frozen rear bay door with a scream of metal. Cole dove aside. Bishop held position until Warren gave the command to move, then sprang with him toward cover behind a steel support post. The plow blade hit the snowbank outside, bounced, and the truck fishtailed into the rear lot. Warren ran for the cruiser. Cole, north exit. He'll head for the rail spur. Cole was already moving, radio in hand, calling direction, plate, and pursuit. Warren released Bishop into the rear compartment, slammed the door, and tore out of the lot as Travis's truck cut across the industrial lane, spraying slush behind it. The chase was not fast in the way city chases were fast. Winter made everything heavier. Tires fought ice. Headlights flashed across warehouse walls and chain-link fences. Travis knew the back roads, but panic made him rough. He blew through a stop sign near the lumber yard, nearly clipped a parked delivery van, then turned hard toward the old rail crossing. Warren kept distance, siren on, voice steady into the radio. Suspect vehicle westbound on Lincoln Spur, approaching rail access road. Use caution. Road is iced. He is armed or believed to be armed. Bishop stood braced in the rear, silent except for the hard rhythm of his breath. Ahead, Travis tried to cross the old tracks where snow had drifted high against the rusted rails. The truck's rear end swung wide. For a second it seemed he might recover. Then the plow blade caught on a buried rail, the truck jolted sideways, and the front end slammed into a frozen embankment. Steam burst from beneath the hood. Travis kicked his door open and ran. On foot, Warren called, dark work jacket, heading into the pines toward the footbridge. He got out with Bishop, but he did not unclip the dog and send him blind into the trees. The old rail line cut through uneven ground, broken fencing, scrap metal under snow, and a creek gorge near the bridge. A K9 could find Travis faster than any man, but speed was not the same as control. Cole, take the left side along the service path. Don't close unless you have cover. Backup blocks the road. I'm tracking with Bishop. Copy, Cole answered. Breathless but clear. Snow swallowed sound beyond the first line of pines. Bishop lowered his nose to Travis's boot prints, then moved with deliberate certainty. Warren followed, one hand on the lead, the other near his holster, letting the dog read the torn snow, the broken twigs, the smear of oil where Travis had grabbed a tree for balance. The smell of menthol tobacco grew stronger near a fallen pine. Bishop paused there, then turned toward the old wooden footbridge that crossed the narrow creek below the tracks. Travis stood at the far end of it, chest heaving, one glove missing, the other hand holding a knife. His trimmed beard was wet with melted snow, his friendly face stripped of all its town charm. Without the smile, he looked ordinary in the worst way. Stay back, he shouted. Warren stopped 20 feet away, Bishop low at his side. Drop the knife, Travis. This is because of him, Travis snapped. That filthy old liar. You're really going to believe a man who sleeps under a bus roof? I believe Audrey. Travis laughed, sharp and panicked. Audrey was nosy. Those old people lose things and blame whoever helps them. I did everything for this town. Everything. You stole from people who trusted you. They didn't need half of it. The sentence left his mouth before he could dress it up, and for a second even Travis seemed to hear himself. Cole appeared behind him on the far side of the bridge, weapon drawn but angled safely, boots planted wide on the snowy boards. Travis twisted, trapped between them. Bishop did not lunge. He did not bark himself wild. He stood with contained force, muscles ready, eyes fixed on the knife hand. Warren saw Travis look at the dog and calculate badly. Call him off, Travis said. He's waiting on me, Warren replied. That should worry you less than the knife in your hand. Calvin did this. You can still say he did. People will believe it. Cole's face changed at that. The last piece of his doubt did not vanish with drama. It hardened into responsibility. I did, Cole said from behind Travis. I believed it. That's enough damage. Travis turned toward him, and the knife shifted. Warren's voice cut through the snow. Knife down now. Travis took one step back, heel slipping on the icy board. Bishop moved only as far as Warren allowed, a low-controlled advance that narrowed Travis's options without forcing blood. Cole closed from the rear angle, steady now, not rushing, not proving himself, just doing the job. Travis, Cole said, look at me, drop it. For a moment there was only the creek under the bridge and the wind through the pines. Then Travis's hand opened, the knife hit the snow-dusted wood with a dull sound. Cole kicked it away and moved in fast. Pinning Travis' arms before he could change his mind, Warren kept Bishop at guard until the cuffs clicked shut. Travis cursed them both, cursed Calvin, cursed Audrey, cursed old people who couldn't remember where they put things. But with each word, he sounded less like a wronged man and more like what he was, someone furious that the town had stopped being useful to him. When backup finally reached the bridge, red and blue lights washed the snow in broken color. Travis was led past Bishop, and this time the dog did not growl. There was no need. The threat had a name, a weapon bagged in evidence, stolen property in plastic bins, bloody gloves waiting in oil, and a victim awake enough to speak. Cole stood beside Warren after the cruisers pulled away. The old rail line stretched behind them, white and silent, leading back toward the town that had nearly been satisfied with the wrong man. We almost did it, Cole said. His voice was low. We almost gave them Calvin, because he looked like the kind of man they were ready to hate. Warren looked at Bishop, who had lowered himself into the snow at last, calm now, breath clouding around his muzzle. Then he looked east, toward the station where Calvin Dorsey was still waiting inside a room that smelled of old coffee and borrowed blankets. "Getting Travis is only half of it," Warren said. Cole followed his gaze, though the town was hidden beyond trees and falling snow. "What's the other half?" Warren clipped Bishop's leash shorter and started back toward the cruiser, giving Calvin his name back. Calvin Dorsey was released before sunrise, though released was a cleaner word than the moment deserved. The paperwork said he was no longer being held in connection with the assault on Audrey Wells. The booking notes were corrected. His name was removed from one column and placed nowhere else, as if a man could be restored simply by being taken out of the wrong box. Warren Holt stood near the side entrance of the Maple Glen station, while Mara Ellison helped Calvin button the same worn brown-gray winter coat he had been wearing when they brought him in. Someone had found his scarf. Someone had returned the little tin from his pocket, the dented one with a faded Red Cross sticker on the lid. Calvin opened it with trembling fingers and looked inside at the old trauma shears, a cracked penlight, and a photograph of a woman with kind eyes standing beside a younger version of him. He closed it quickly, like even memory needed warmth. Cole Ransom stood across the room, hat in both hands, unable to decide whether stepping closer would be courage or intrusion. Bishop sat beside Warren, black and tan body still, the canine harness removed for the first time in 2 days. Without the patch and the duty light, he looked less like a police asset and more like what he also was, a living creature who had stood between a man and a mistake when people had been moving too fast to see it. Calvin did not look at him yet. He looked at the floor, the walls, the doors, anything except the officers who had cuffed him and the world that had watched. "You're free to go," Warren said, and hated how thin the sentence sounded. Calvin lifted his eyes. "Free where?" Mara touched his elbow but did not answer for him. Outside, Maple Glen was waking under a pale wash of snowlight. The market booths had been taken down, leaving square patches of trampled white along Main Street. News of Travis Kellen's arrest had traveled through town with the same speed as the accusation against Calvin, but it had arrived differently. People repeated this version more softly. They were careful with it. They said allegedly when speaking of Travis, as if the stolen rings, the bloody gloves, Audrey's statement, and the boxes in his garage still needed politeness. No one had been careful with Calvin. That was the first thing Warren noticed when they stepped outside. The second was that several people were watching from across the street. Ruth Bellamy stood near the post office steps, cane planted in the snow, a dark wool coat wrapped tight around her small frame. A man Warren recognized from the hardware store looked away as soon as Calvin emerged. The candle vendor from the alley stood behind a parked car, crying again, but this time without the authority of fear behind it. Someone had placed a paper cup of coffee on the station steps. No note, no apology, just steam rising from a white plastic lid. Calvin saw it and stopped. For a strange second, no one moved. Then he bent slowly, picked it up, and held it in both hands, as if warmth itself had become suspicious. "They think coffee fixes it," he said. Warren did not offer a correction. Calvin looked across the street at the faces that would not quite meet his. "Last night they knew my name when they wanted it to mean something ugly. This morning they forgot how to say it." Mara's expression tightened, but she let the words stand. Some truths had to be spoken in the cold before they could be carried indoors. Warren watched Calvin take one step down, then another. The old man's shoulders were hunched as though he expected someone to shout after him. No one did. That silence was not mercy. It was discomfort pretending to be respect. At the curb, Ruth Bellamy suddenly crossed the street. She moved slowly, angrily, as if age had stolen her speed but not her will. Warren started forward in case the snow betrayed her cane, but Cole reached her first and offered an arm. She accepted it without looking at him. When she stood before Calvin, she seemed smaller than him by a foot and stronger by some measure no ruler could capture. "Mr. Dorsey," she said. Calvin blinked, unused to the shape of his name in that tone. Ruth pulled off one glove and held out her bare hand. "Audrey told me you kept her alive." Calvin looked at her hand for a long time. "I did what I remembered." "That is more than most of us did," Ruth said. The candle vendor began sobbing harder across the street. Calvin shook Ruth's hand carefully, as if afraid of breaking something that had already been repaired once. That was the moment Cole turned away. Warren saw him wipe his face with the back of his hand and pretend the cold had done it. 3 weeks passed before Audrey returned to the bakery. Maple Glen marked those weeks in awkward gestures. People brought soup to the hospital, but did not know whether to bring soup to Calvin. Some left envelopes at Mara's office. Some asked Warren whether Calvin needed anything, and Warren learned to answer, "He needs people to stop talking about him like he isn't in the room." Travis Kellen's garage remained sealed behind police tape. The cheerful snowplow sign was removed after someone spray-painted thief across it in blue. Warren ordered the graffiti photographed, then cleaned, because justice did not improve by borrowing cruelty from the people it arrested. Calvin spent the first week in a winter shelter 2 towns over because Maple Glen's small emergency beds were full. Mara drove him to appointments, helped him begin the slow humiliation of replacing identification, benefits paperwork, medical records, and proof that he existed. Calvin resisted almost everything. He missed appointments. He refused a donated coat the first time. He slept one night under the bus awning again even after a bed was available. Mara did not call it failure. "People don't walk out of the cold just because someone opens a door," she told Warren. "Sometimes they have to believe the door won't slam behind them." When Audrey finally unlocked Wells Bakery, she did it before dawn. Her shoulder was still stiff beneath a soft oatmeal cardigan, her face thinner, her honey-brown hair tied back with less care than before. But she opened the ovens herself. By 7, the smell of bread moved down Main Street like forgiveness trying to learn where to stand. She had asked Warren not to bring cameras, not to let the mayor speak, not to turn survival into town theater. So the gathering was small: Mara near the front window, Cole in plain clothes at a back table, Ruth Bellamy by the counter, a few older residents whose missing belongings had been returned in evidence bags, and Calvin standing just outside the door with his hands in his pockets. Audrey saw him through the glass. She did not wave him in like a hostess. She walked outside into the cold, slow but steady, and stopped in front of him. Main Street quieted around them. "I remember your voice," she said. Stared at the sidewalk. "You were bleeding pretty good." Audrey smiled faintly, and the smile hurt to look at because it had survived something meant to end it. "You kept saying, 'Look at me. Don't sleep. You're not leaving yet.'" Calvin swallowed. "That's what you say." "No," Audrey said. "That's what you said." She reached into the bakery doorway and took out a folded deep forest green winter coat. It was new but plain, sturdy, the kind of coat bought not for charity photographs but for weather. Calvin's face changed immediately. "I don't need." "I know," Audrey said. "You don't need pity. This isn't that." He looked at the coat, then at her bandaged shoulder beneath the cardigan. "What is it?" "Work clothes," she said, "if you want them." His eyes lifted. "Work? Mornings. Unlocking the back door, bringing in flower deliveries when your shoulder is better than mine, coffee urns, sweeping the front walk, day pay, no promises you don't want, no speeches." Calvin looked as if she had offered him something more frightening than shelter. "I'm not reliable." "Neither is the old oven," Audrey said. "I keep trying with that too." A few people inside laughed softly, not at Calvin, but with relief that the room had not shattered. He did not put the coat on. Not then. He took it folded over his arms, as though accepting it fully would require a kind of trust his hands had not practiced in years. Later that morning, Warren found him behind the bakery, in the same alley where the snow had once held Audrey's blood. The brick wall had been scrubbed, but faint traces remained in the mortar, because some stains did not ask permission to stay. Calvin stood near the rear door, the green coat still folded beside him on a crate. Bishop sat at Warren's left side, calm, unvested, watching Calvin with steady, amber-brown eyes. "I owe you an apology," Warren said. Calvin did not turn. "You gave me coffee at the station. That wasn't an apology." "No." Warren stepped closer, stopping beside the place where Calvin had knelt. "I cuffed you too fast. I let the picture tell me more than it knew." Calvin looked at the wall. "You also looked again. After Bishop made me, still looked. There was no warmth in it, but there was fairness." For Calvin, fairness was no small gift. Warren took the hit he deserved and waited. Calvin finally faced him. "Next time," he said, voice low, Look harder before you decide what kind of man someone is. Warren nodded. I will. Not just me. I know. Calvin studied him, perhaps deciding whether the promise was a police answer or a human one. Then he looked at Bishop. He knew before you. Warren glanced at the dog. He knew something was wrong. Calvin gave the faintest smile. That's more than most. That afternoon, Cole arrived at the bakery without his uniform. He wore a gray hoodie under a denim jacket lined with fleece and carried a paper grocery bag in both hands. Warren watched from his cruiser across the street, not interfering. Cole found Calvin near the back steps, where the old man was trying to make sense of Audrey's delivery clipboard as if it were written in another language. The young deputy stood there a moment too long, then held out the bag. Mara said you forget to eat when you're mad. Calvin looked inside. Sandwiches, fruit, a thermos, socks. She tell you to bring this? No. You trying to feel better? Cole's face reddened. He could have lied. He didn't. Maybe. But I'm also sorry. Calvin closed the bag. You were sure. I was wrong. That's not the same sentence. Cole nodded. I was wrong about you. Calvin looked at him for several seconds, then took the bag. That one's better. It was not forgiveness. It was not friendship. It was a beginning small enough to be real. Winter moved on. Travis's case went to the county prosecutor. Audrey's notebook became evidence. The stolen items were cataloged, returned when possible, grieved over when not. Calvin began showing up at the bakery before sunrise 3 mornings a week. Some days he entered through the back door. Some days he stood outside for 10 minutes before Audrey pretended not to notice and left the door open. Mara got him a bed in a transitional housing program with a caseworker who did not talk to him like a child. He missed his second appointment and made the third. He wore the green coat when the temperature dropped below 10, but still kept his old scarf. No one argued with him about it. Healing, Warren thought, was not a clean line. It was a man keeping an old scarf because part of him still did not trust the new coat to stay. On a pale blue morning after a light snow, Warren and Bishop walked the alley behind Wells Bakery during routine patrol. The town was quiet enough that the scrape of a shovel sounded half a block away. Audrey had just turned on the front lights. Inside, warm yellow spread across the pastry case. Calvin stood at the back door, locking the delivery entrance, the green coat finally on his shoulders, a bag of hot rolls in one hand for the shelter. He looked tired. He looked wary. He also looked present. Bishop stepped forward before Warren gave any command. Warren let the leash slacken. The German shepherd approached Calvin, then sat squarely in front of him. No growl, no tension, no warning left in his body. Calvin looked down at the dog for a long moment. His hand rose, stopped, then lowered gently onto Bishop's head. Bishop accepted the touch with the solemn patience of a partner, acknowledging another kind of service. Calvin's mouth trembled. You were the first one to believe me, he said. Warren stood in the blue winter light and did not correct him. Technically, Bishop had believed no story. He had followed scent, posture, threat, training. He had done his job, but sometimes a job done well became mercy to someone who had stopped expecting any. Calvin scratched once behind Bishop's ear, then picked up the bag of rolls and started toward Main Street. Warren watched him go, not as a man fixed, not as a man redeemed for the comfort of everyone else, but as a man still walking. That mattered more. Justice, Warren understood, was not only the arrest of Travis Kellen. It was not only the evidence bags, the warrant, the chase along the rail line, or the confession hidden inside a coward's panic. Justice was also the morning after, and the morning after that, when the person everyone had been ready to hate had to keep living among the people who had hated him too quickly. It was a police officer remembering to look twice. It was a young deputy learning that speed could become cruelty if it outran humility. It was a baker saying work instead of charity. It was a dog sitting calmly before a man who had once been dragged away in cuffs. Warren touched the old black watch on his wrist, the one he wore to remind himself that the first hour of a case could steal years if handled badly. Then he looked at Bishop, at Calvin crossing into the bakery's warm front light, and at the alley where snow had fallen over blood and still failed to hide the truth. Sometimes justice began with a camera, a witness, a lab report, or a warrant. And sometimes it began with a K9 standing between the world and the man it had already decided not to see. Sometimes justice does not begin with a loud confession or a perfect piece of evidence. Sometimes it begins with one quiet choice: to look again. Calvin was almost condemned because he looked like the kind of man people expected to blame. But one officer and one faithful canine reminded an entire town that a person's worth is not measured by their coat, their past, or where they sleep at night. In our own lives, may we be slower to judge, quicker to listen, and brave enough to see the person others have already dismissed. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe stories like this still matter, please subscribe and join us for the next one. May God give you eyes of mercy, a heart for truth, and peace wherever this story finds you.